When Benjamin Fletcher's own parents sold him like livestock, he figured that was it. His worth as a man had been measured, and the answer came back, worthless. All because he couldn't give them grandchildren. They took his future and traded it for $20 and a horse. So when he found a desperate, pregnant woman on a dusty street in Wyoming, he should have kept walking. He had his own problems. Getting tangled up in hers was the last thing a smart man would do. But neither of them knew they were about to prove that the strongest families aren't born from blood. They're forged in the fire, by broken souls who refuse to be thrown away. The smell of horse manure and failure hung heavy in the air. Benjamin Fletcher counted his last 3 coins outside a saloon in Cheyenne, Wyoming. 1869 was a bad year to have empty pockets, and an even emptier future. His stomach growled, a low, angry sound. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, when a kind woman gave him stale bread for chopping her firewood. "Move along, boy," Sheriff Mason grunted, his badge glinting in the sun. "Beggars make the town look bad." Ben stuffed the coins deep in his pocket and walked. He was 26, but the lines around his eyes and the gray at his temples told a different story. A story of hard work and harder luck. His last job, loading freight cars, had ended when the foreman decided he wasn't worth the pay. The dusty street was a road to nowhere. Cheyenne was booming, the railroad spitting out new settlers with money to burn every single day. But none of it seemed to be for him. He was a ghost in a town full of life. Then a scream cut through the morning air. It came from 2nd Street. Ben's feet moved before his brain could object. Trouble was something he'd learned to avoid. But that sound, it pulled at him. He found her outside Morrison's boarding house. A woman with auburn hair spilling from its pins, wrestling with a huge wooden trunk. A man in a fine black suit just stood there, watching her struggle. The woman's dress was torn at the shoulder. There were angry red marks on her wrist. "I said, leave me alone, Mr. Garrett," she yelled, her voice shaking. "I don't owe you anything." The man laughed, a sound like ice cracking. "You owe me plenty, Kate Morrison. Rent, food, interest. Your dear old aunt left you drowning in debt, and I'm here to collect." Ben watched from the shadows. Kate tried to lift the trunk again. It was obvious she was pregnant, not far along, but enough that the strain was too much. Her face was pale. She swayed on her feet. "I've got an easy payment plan for you," Garrett said, his voice slick as snake oil. "Come work for me at the Golden Horse. We'll call it even. A pretty thing like you could make a fortune off the railroad men." The Golden Horse. Ben's hands curled into fists. It was the roughest saloon in town. Women who worked there didn't last long. Kate straightened her shoulders. "I'd rather starve." "That can be arranged," Garrett shot back. "You have until tomorrow night. After that, I start taking my payment out of this building." His eyes crawled over the boarding house, hungry. He tipped his hat and walked away, his boots clicking on the sidewalk like a countdown. Kate sank onto her trunk and buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook. This was Ben's cue to leave. He had his own empty stomach to worry about. But as he watched her sitting there, alone, he remembered. He remembered what it felt like to have nowhere left to turn. 5 years ago, a doctor in Kansas City had delivered the verdict. Cold. Final. Ben would never father children. In a world where a man's worth was his family line, that made him a broken thing. "It's not that we don't love you," his mother had said, her eyes fixed on the floor. "But what's the point of keeping you around?" His father was more direct. "We need sons to work the farm and carry on the Fletcher name. You can't. Time you made your own way." They gave him $20 and a horse and told him to never come back. Broken things have no value. That was the lesson. And Benjamin Fletcher was broken. Now, watching this woman, Kate Morrison, struggling with a world that was trying to break her too, something stirred in his chest. Maybe he couldn't have his own children. Maybe he couldn't inherit a farm. But he had 2 strong hands. Maybe, just maybe, that was worth something to someone. He stepped out of the shadows. Kate looked up, her amber eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. "Ma'am," Ben said, tipping the brim of his hat. "Looks like you could use some help." She wiped her eyes, trying to stand. "I'm managing just fine." "Yes, ma'am. I can see that," he said, kneeling by the trunk. "But sometimes managing gets a little easier with an extra pair of hands. Where do you want this?" She studied his face for a long moment, trying to figure him out. Finally, she pointed to the front door. "Inside. Second door on the left." Ben lifted the trunk. It was heavier than it looked, filled with a whole life. The boarding house was clean, well kept. Lace curtains, polished floors. She took pride in this place. As he set it down in a small office, he saw her press a hand to her lower back. She was trying to hide it, but he knew the signs. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'm afraid I can't pay you." "Didn't ask for payment," Ben replied. "Sometimes folks just need a hand." Her eyes searched his face again, and he felt like she was seeing right through the worn clothes and the empty pockets. "You're not from around here." "No, ma'am. Been looking for a place that might have room for someone like me." "Someone like you?" Ben chose his words with care. "Someone who's learned that the family you're born with, and the family you choose, aren't always the same thing." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Mr. Benjamin Fletcher." "Mr. Fletcher," she said. "I think you and I might understand each other better than most." The kitchen smelled like fresh bread and something Ben hadn't smelled in years. Hope. Kate moved around the stove, preparing a simple meal that looked like a king's feast to him. "Sit," she said, pointing to a mended chair. "You look like you haven't eaten in days." His pride wanted to argue, but his stomach roared its betrayal. Kate let out the first real laugh he'd heard from her, and it loosened something tight in his chest. "When was the last time?" she asked, ladling thick beef stew into a bowl. "Yesterday morning," he admitted, taking the bowl with hands that trembled just a little. She added a slab of cornbread and a cup of steaming coffee. A miracle. "And before that?" Ben paused. "Day before, maybe." The stew was the best thing he'd tasted in years. "Ma'am, I can't pay for this." "I'm not expecting payment," she cut in. "I'm expecting decent conversation. It's been too quiet since my Aunt Martha passed." She told him the story. She'd inherited the boarding house 2 months ago. Her great-aunt had been a respected woman, but too generous. She let people stay on credit, never turned away someone in need. "She left me the building," Kate said, stirring her stew, "and about $40 in debt. Mr. Garrett holds the notes. He says I owe him nearly $200. Ben put down his spoon. $200? That's a fortune. "Exactly." Kate's eyes flashed with anger. "He's been trying to buy this place for years. Aunt Martha always refused. Now he's using the debt to force me out, or—" her voice dropped to a whisper, "or into working for him. You heard what he said about the golden horse." Ben knew the stories. He pictured Kate in that place, and his hand tightened around his coffee cup. "What about the other boarders? Won't they help?" Her laugh was brittle, without humor. "What other boarders? Word gets around. Soon as they heard about the debt, they all left. Can't blame them. Who wants to be here when Garrett comes to collect?" Ben looked around. The shelves were almost bare. The coffee was weak. Her dress was clean but carefully mended. She was drowning. "How far along are you?" he asked gently. Her hand flew to her stomach, then dropped. "I don't know what you mean." "Ma'am, I've been around enough farm animals to see the signs. You're with child, maybe 2 months, and there's no husband, or you'd have mentioned him when Garrett was here." Her composure finally cracked. He saw the scared young woman hiding underneath. "His name was Charles Whitman," she said, her voice turning bitter. "From the railroad office. He promised marriage. Turns out his business affairs included a wife back in Ohio." Ben nodded. He understood this kind of betrayal all too well. "When I told him about the baby," she continued, "he offered me $50 to take care of the problem. When I said no, he got a transfer to California and disappeared." Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. So here I am, an unmarried woman, expecting a child, trying to run a boarding house I can't pay for, with a man like Garrett circling like a vulture. They were the same. Both outcasts. Both carrying burdens society said made them worthless. How much money do you have? He asked. $7.34. I have $3.12, Ben said. That's $10. 46. It's a start. She just stared at him, confused. Ben leaned forward, his eyes intense. You need boarders to pay Garrett. I need a place to work for my keep. Maybe we can help each other out. Mr. Fletcher, you have $3. That's not even a week's rent. What if I work for it? He pressed. This place needs repairs. The front steps are loose. The gutters are full. The stable needs a new roof. I'm handy with tools. In exchange for room and board, I'll fix this place up. Get it ready for paying customers. She shook her head. That doesn't solve the Garrett problem. He wants money. No, Ben agreed. But it keeps us both fed and sheltered while we figure out a way. Maybe together we can bring in enough money to keep him at bay. Why would anyone want to stay here now? Ben smiled. A real smile. Because people like us, people who've been cast aside, we recognize a safe harbor when we see one. This place, with you running it, could be exactly what Cheyenne's forgotten people are looking for. She was quiet, studying his face. Why would you do this? Help a stranger with her problems? He thought of his parents, the coldness in his father's eyes, the years of wandering. Because maybe helping you is the same as helping myself, he said. Maybe we're both just looking for a place where being broken doesn't mean you're worthless. Kate looked around her kitchen, at the life her aunt had left her, at the terrifying future ahead. Then she looked back at Ben. Room 3, she said quietly. Upstairs. It's small, but it gets the morning light. We'll try it for 2 weeks. A feeling bloomed in Ben's chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Thank you, ma'am, he said. You won't regret it. Call me Kate, she said, standing up. And Mr. Fletcher, I hope you're right. Because if this doesn't work, we're both going to find out what it's like to be truly alone. As Ben climbed the stairs, he felt the weight of a new purpose settle on his shoulders. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He had a reason to care about tomorrow. Outside, the gaslights of Cheyenne flickered on, pushing back the dark. Inside, 2 broken people had decided to try and build something new. Kate's scream ripped through the cold November air. Ben dropped his hammer and ran, his boots pounding the frozen dirt, panic clawing at his throat. He burst into the kitchen. Kate was gripping the table, her face as white as snow, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. What is it? He yelled, reaching for her. She held up a trembling hand. The baby, she whispered, her other hand pressed to her belly. Something's wrong. A sharp pain, like lightning. Ben's heart slammed against his ribs. She was only 7 months along. It was too early, far too early. We have to get you to Doc Martinez, he said, grabbing her coat. She tried to stand, but another wave of pain doubled her over. Tears streamed down her face. Her eyes were wide with terror. I can't lose this baby, Ben, she cried. It's all I have left. Her voice broke, and something fierce and protective roared to life inside him. Without a second thought, he scooped her into his arms. She was so light. He carried her through the boarding house, past the shocked faces of the few boarders they'd managed to attract. An elderly widow opened the door. A young bank clerk ran ahead to get the wagon ready. Hold on, Kate, Ben murmured, wrapping her in thick blankets. We're going to get through this. Both of you. The ride to the doctor's office was the longest journey of his life. Every rut in the road made Kate gasp in pain. Ben found himself praying, bargaining with a god he'd long since abandoned. Doc Martinez was a weathered man who had seen it all. He took one look at Kate and started barking orders. Get her on the table, I need hot water, clean towels. You wait outside. Ben started to argue, but Kate grabbed his hand. Stay, she whispered. Please. He paced the hallway like a caged animal. He could hear her muffled cries through the door, each one a knife in his gut. When the doctor finally came out, his face was grim. "The baby is coming early," he said, no sugarcoating. "Mrs. Morrison is strong, but the next few hours, they'll decide everything." "What can I do?" Ben asked, his voice raw. "Pray," the doctor said, "and be ready." Ben sat by her bed as the sun went down, holding her hand, trying to will his strength into her. Her face was fragile, but her grip was like iron. "Tell me about your family," she whispered between the waves of pain. Before. He didn't want to dredge up those memories. Not now. But her eyes pleaded with him. She needed the distraction. "My father owned a grain mill," he began, his voice distant. "I was supposed to be the fourth Fletcher to run it. I was good with my hands, good with the machinery." Another contraction hit. She squeezed his hand, her knuckles white, but motioned for him to go on. "I married Sarah Beth Williams when I was 21. We tried for 5 years to have children. Nothing." His voice trailed off, old pain mixing with new fear. "What happened?" Kate asked when the pain subsided. "My parents, they wanted grandchildren, to carry on the Fletcher name. When the doctors told us I was the one who couldn't, everything changed. My father sold my labor contract to a railroad crew heading west. Said the family needed a man who could continue the bloodline, not a broken tool." Kate's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't for her own pain. "And Sarah Beth?" "She didn't even say goodbye," he admitted. "Her father arranged a new marriage for her before I was even out of town." Kate struggled to sit up, her face flushed with anger. "Those people were not your family, Ben Fletcher. Real family doesn't throw you away when things get hard. Real family stands by you when the world tells you you're worthless." Before he could answer, another contraction, stronger than all the rest, ripped through her. She cried out, a raw, primal sound. Doc Martinez rushed back in. "The baby's coming, ready or not," he said grimly. "Mr. Fletcher, I need your help." This was it. The moment of truth. Here was a woman who had shown him kindness. A child that might not survive the night. He could walk away, save himself from more heartbreak. Or he could stay. He could fight for this makeshift family that had become his world. Ben rolled up his sleeves and moved to Kate's side. For the first time since his parents cast him out, he felt like he belonged. He wasn't a broken tool. He was the man she needed him to be. The baby's first cry was weak, but it was there. A tiny, fierce sound that cut through the silence of the room. Alive. Ben's knees nearly gave out from relief. He watched the doctor wrap the infant, no bigger than a loaf of bread, in clean blankets. Kate lay exhausted against the pillows, tears of joy and fear streaming down her face as she reached for her daughter. "She's so small," Kate whispered. "Will she be okay?" "She's a fighter," the doctor said, placing the baby on Kate's chest. "Born early, but her lungs are strong. The next few days are critical." Ben stared at the tiny, perfect person. This wasn't his child by blood, but watching her little fingers curl around Kate's thumb filled him with a love so fierce it stole his breath. He had helped bring her into this world. He was already tangled up in her life, and he couldn't imagine a future without her in it. "What's her name?" he asked softly. "Elizabeth," Kate answered without a second's thought. "After my grandmother. She always said children were a blessing no matter how they came to you. Elizabeth. Lizzie." The name felt right. He could already picture teaching her to ride, helping her with her letters. The thought was so clear, so real, it shocked him. "Mr. Fletcher," Doc Martinez said, pulling him aside. "I need to talk to you." Ben's stomach knotted. "Is Kate all right?" "The birth was hard on her," the doctor said, his voice low. "She needs to recover, but I'm more worried about her circumstances. A woman alone with a premature infant. It's a hard road." He didn't need to say more. Ben knew. An unmarried mother would be judged, whispered about. It would make life impossible. "She won't be alone," Ben said, the certainty in his own voice surprising him. "I'll help her." The doctor's eyes were shrewd. "That's a serious commitment, Mr. Fletcher. Helping a woman raise another man's child. People will talk. They'll assume things." "Let them talk," Ben said, his jaw tight. Kate took me in when I had nothing. She treated me like I was worth something. I'm not going to abandon her now." "And if the child's father returns?" the doctor asked quietly. "Then he'll have to go through me." The doctor nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Very well. But this won't be easy. The baby will need feeding every 2 hours, day and night. Constant care. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," Ben said, without a flicker of hesitation. He didn't know if he was, not really. But he knew he couldn't walk away. For the next 3 days, he barely left Kate's side. He slept in a chair, waking at the slightest sound from mother or child. He learned to warm milk, to change tiny diapers with his clumsy hands, to rock a fussing baby in the dead of night. "You don't have to do this," Kate told him on the 4th morning. She was stronger, but he looked exhausted. "Where else would I be?" He answered simply. "This is where I belong." She searched his face. "Ben, if you stay, people will assume. They'll assume you're her father. They'll judge you." He was carefully lifting Elizabeth from her cradle. The baby had gotten stronger, her cries more demanding. "Kate, my whole life, I've been judged by people who thought they knew what I was worth. My own parents found me wanting. But when I look at this little girl, I don't see a burden. I see a new life that deserves every chance we can give her. And when I look at you, I see the kindest, strongest person I've ever known." Tears welled in Kate's eyes. "What are you saying, Ben?" "I'm saying," he said quietly, "that if people want to assume I'm Elizabeth's father, maybe that's not such a bad thing. And if they want to think we're a family, well, maybe we already are." The room was silent for a long moment. "Are you asking me to marry you, Benjamin Fletcher?" His heart hammered in his chest. He hadn't planned it, but the words were true. "I suppose I am. Not because you need saving, but because these last few days, they've shown me what it feels like to be part of something worth fighting for." He shifted Elizabeth to one arm and took Kate's hand. "I can't promise you riches, but I can promise you loyalty. I will never walk away. I will never make you feel ashamed." Kate squeezed his fingers. "And Elizabeth?" Ben looked down at the baby in his arms, a surge of love washing over him. "Elizabeth will grow up knowing she is wanted, cherished, by a family that chose her." Kate leaned forward and kissed his cheek. "Yes, Benjamin Fletcher, I'll marry you, not because I need a husband, but because I want a partner." As Elizabeth drifted to sleep in his arms, Ben felt a sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't a broken man anymore. He was a husband, a father. He knew exactly who he was, and exactly where he belonged. Thunder crashed outside. A shiny black carriage, pulled by 2 expensive horses, rolled to a stop in front of the boarding house. Ben's blood ran cold. "Kate," he called down the hall, his voice tight. "He's here, and he brought friends." Kate appeared, 8 months pregnant now, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set. "How many?" she asked, moving slowly down the stairs. "3 of them. Him and 2 others who look like they chew rocks for fun." A heavy knock rattled the front door. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. "Remember," Ben whispered. "Don't let him see you're afraid." She nodded and opened the door. Charles Whitman filled the doorway, a storm in a tailored suit. He was handsome, rich, and carried himself like a man who owned the world. Behind him stood 2 massive men in cheap suits, their hands never far from the bulges under their coats. "Catherine, my dear," Whitman said, his voice smooth as poison. "You look substantial." "Mr. Whitman?" Kate's voice was steady. "I received your letter. I chose to ignore it." "May we come in?" he asked, already stepping past her, his eyes taking in the modest room with disdain. He looked at Ben like he was a piece of furniture. "You must be the hired help." "Ben Fletcher," Ben said, not offering his hand. "Ah, yes, Fletcher." Whitman's smile was a predator's grin. "I made some inquiries. The man sold by his own parents. Because you're defective. Heat flared in Ben's neck, but he held his tongue. Getting angry was a trap. Some men's worth, Ben said quietly, is measured by what they protect. Whitman laughed. How noble. Catherine, surely we can discuss family matters in private. Mr. Fletcher stays, Kate said, moving to stand by Ben's side. Whitman's charm vanished, replaced by something cold and hard. Very well. I've come to offer you marriage. My divorce is final. The child will have my name, my protection, my fortune. And if I refuse, Kate whispered, then I'll be forced to take legal action, he said, turning from the window. One of his thugs handed him a thick envelope. Custody papers. Signed by a judge in Denver who understands that children belong with their proper families. He understands the power of money. Kate sank into a chair, her hands clutching her belly. You can't just take a person's baby, Ben said, but the words sounded weak even to him. Can I? Whitman mocked. Mr. Fletcher, you are a nobody. I am a respected man of business. Who do you think a judge will side with? An unmarried mother living in a boarding house? Or me? The silence was suffocating. Ben felt helpless, watching Kate's world crumble around her. I need time to think, she finally managed. Of course, Whitman said, tucking the papers away. But don't think too long. 3 days. And Catherine, he added, pausing at the door, don't even think about running. The railroad goes everywhere. There's no place you can hide from me. The door clicked shut behind them. He means it, Kate whispered, her shoulders shaking. He'll take my baby, Ben, and there's nothing I can do. Ben knelt beside her, his rough hands covering hers. There's always something we can do. What? What can we do against a man like that? Ben's mind raced. Running was impossible. Arguing was useless. They had no money, no power. And then an idea. Dangerous, crazy. But it was all they had. We changed the rules of the game, he said quietly. We play a hand he's not expecting. How? He took a deep breath. This would change everything. It would save them. Or it would ruin them forever. We get married, Kate, he said. Tonight, before he comes back. Her eyes went wide. A married woman had rights. A child born to a married couple couldn't just be taken away by another man, no matter how rich he was. Ben, you don't understand what you're offering. I get to call you my wife, he cut in, his voice growing stronger. That baby gets to be born into a family, a real family. It means Charles Whitman can take his money and his threats and find out what it feels like to lose. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall. Kate squeezed his hands, tears streaming down her face, but a flicker of hope in her eyes. Are you sure? There's no going back from this. You'd be tied to me, to this child. Ben smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Kate Morrison, my whole life I've been looking for something worth being tied to. I think I finally found it. Rain hammered against the church windows. Reverend Phillips, old and trembling, looked at the two of them standing before his altar. You are certain about this? He asked for the third time. Marriage is not a bond to be entered into lightly. We're sure, Reverend, Kate said, her voice shaking. We need to do this tonight. Their only witnesses were a few kind townspeople who understood desperation when they saw it, and Ben's cousin, Daniel, who had ridden hard all day to be there. The Reverend began the ceremony. Ben couldn't take his eyes off Kate, in her mother's simple blue dress, heavy with another man's child. She was the bravest, most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Do you, Benjamin Fletcher, take this woman? His throat was dry, but his voice was clear and strong. I do. Do you, Catherine Morrison, take this man? Her eyes met his, and in them he saw more than just gratitude. He saw the beginning of something real. I do, she whispered. They exchanged simple gold bands, donated by the laundry woman. They were worth less than Whitman's boots. but they felt heavier than all the gold in the world. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Ben felt a lock click open inside his chest. He was no longer Ben Fletcher, the broken man. He was Ben Fletcher, husband, soon-to-be father. Walking back to the boarding house through the rain, the world looked different, more solid, more real. "Feeling any different?" Kate asked, a note of wonder in her voice. "Everything's different," he said, "and nothing's different." She laughed, a sound like music. Perfect sense. Later, after the other boarders had offered their quiet congratulations, they found themselves alone in the kitchen. The weight of what they had done settled between them. "I should probably—" Ben started, gesturing towards the stairs, unsure of what came next. "Stay," Kate said quickly. "We need to talk about tomorrow. When he comes back." They sat at the table. Her new ring glinted in the lamplight. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. "Legally?" "Yes," he said. "A married woman has rights. He can't claim a child born to a married couple. Not easily." "And personally?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Can we make this work? This arrangement?" Ben reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "Kate, this isn't an arrangement for me. Not anymore. I think I've been half in love with you since the day I first saw you." Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Ben Fletcher, are you telling me you married me for love?" "I'm saying I married you to protect you," he said. "But I'm hoping that one day you might find something in me worth loving back." She stood, came around the table, and put her hand on his cheek. "Someday might be sooner than you think," she whispered. And she kissed him. Not a polite wedding peck, but a real kiss. A kiss that promised a future they would build together, one courageous day at a time. Tomorrow, Charles Wittman would return. But he wouldn't find a helpless woman. He would find a family. And for the first time in his life, his money wasn't going to be enough. The baby's first cry split the cold winter air. Ben nearly dropped the firewood he was carrying. Inside his cousin Daniel's cabin, the women's voices were a low, urgent hum. He'd faced down blizzards and angry cattle, but nothing terrified him like this. "Easy, cousin," Daniel said, handing him a cup of coffee. "Emma's delivered more babies than anyone. Kate's in good hands." But 3 days of labor had shredded Ben's nerves. Every sound from the bedroom upstairs was like a hammer blow to his heart. "What if something goes wrong?" he muttered, pacing the porch. "What if I lose them both?" Then, another cry from upstairs. This one was different, stronger, more demanding. It wasn't Kate. "Ben Fletcher!" Emma's voice rang out, full of joy. "Get up here and meet your daughter." He took the stairs 2 at a time. Kate was propped against pillows, exhausted but triumphant, her eyes shining. In her arms, wrapped in a quilt, was the most perfect thing he had ever seen. "Meet Elizabeth Morrison Fletcher," Kate whispered. The baby had Kate's nose and what promised to be Ben's hair color. She was tiny, but her little fist waved in the air with fierce determination. Ben sank into a chair, his legs suddenly weak. She's perfect." "She's ours," Kate corrected softly. "She'll grow up knowing she was wanted, chosen, loved." He reached out a calloused finger and stroked Elizabeth's cheek. The baby turned towards his touch, and his throat tightened. The world had told him he was worthless because he couldn't create a child from his own blood. But holding this baby, who was absolutely of his heart, he knew. He knew being a father had nothing to do with blood. It had everything to do with love. "Can I hold her?" he asked, his voice rough. Kate smiled and carefully passed their daughter into his arms. Elizabeth settled against his chest with a soft sigh, as if she knew she was home. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your papa. I promise you will never, ever doubt that you are loved. You will never be cast aside because you're not what someone else expected." Kate's hand rested on his arm. "She's lucky to have you," Ben Fletcher. Through the window the sun was rising over the mountains. He held his daughter, his world shrunk to the tiny weight in his arms. The man who had been sold like livestock, the broken tool, felt his heart swell with the love he'd been saving his whole life. This was his family, forged by choice, strengthened by storms. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, everything was exactly as it should be. The sound of hoofbeats shattered the morning 5 years later. Ben's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. He knew that sound. Trouble. "Papa Ben, who's coming?" Elizabeth asked. At 5, she was a perfect mix of Kate's wit and Ben's stubbornness. Kate saw the riders through the window. Her face went white. She put a protective hand on their daughter's shoulder. "Go inside, sweetheart. Play with your dolls." "But Mama Kate—" "Now, Elizabeth," Ben said, his voice leaving no room for argument. The lead rider pulled his horse to a stop. It was Charles Whitman. Older, grayer, but with the same arrogant sneer. "Fletcher," he said. He tipped his hat to Kate. "Mrs. Fletcher." "Whitman," Ben said, stepping off the porch, placing himself between the man and his home. "You're a long way from the railroad." "Indeed." Whitman's smile was sharp. "I'm looking for my daughter." The words landed like a punch to the gut. Kate gasped. "I don't know what you're talking about," Ben said, his voice dangerously steady. Whitman pulled a document from his coat. "Elizabeth Morrison Fletcher, born February 14, 1870, daughter of Catherine Morrison Fletcher and Charles Edward Whitman. I have a court order establishing my paternity and granting me custody." "That's impossible." Kate stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "She's our daughter. We adopted her legally." "Ah, but you see," Whitman said, enjoying their shock, "an adoption requires the consent of both natural parents. Since my paternity was not legally established at the time, your adoption is invalid, an oversight I have now corrected." The trap snapped shut. He had waited 5 years. Waited for them to build a life, to build a family, just so he could enjoy tearing it all down. He had the money, the lawyers, the power. They had nothing. "What do you want?" Ben asked. "What any father wants, to provide for his child. Elizabeth deserves better than this hovel. She deserves wealth, society, opportunity. She deserves parents who love her," Kate shot back. "Parents who have been here for every scraped knee and bedtime story. You are a stranger to her." "Sentiment is touching, but irrelevant," Whitman sneered. "Blood is what matters. She is my blood. I can give her a life you can't even dream of." From inside, they could hear Elizabeth singing to her dolls. "Her best interests," Kate said, her voice shaking with rage, "are served by staying with the family who has loved her every single day of her life." "I was married," Whitman said coldly. "Now I am free. I am here to claim my rights." Ben stepped forward, every muscle coiled. "And if we refuse?" "Then I will return with the territorial marshal and take her by force," Whitman said. "I'm offering you the courtesy of cooperation. But make no mistake, Elizabeth is coming with me, one way or another." He turned his horse. "I'll be back tomorrow morning. Have her things ready." As he rode away, Ben and Kate stood frozen on the porch. The world they had built was about to be ripped apart. "We can't let him do this," Kate whispered, her voice breaking. "She's our daughter, Ben. She's been ours since the moment she drew breath." Ben pulled her into his arms. He could feel her whole body trembling. "No," he said, his voice quiet, but filled with the hard steel of a man who had finally found something worth dying for. "We can't. And we won't." The door opened behind them, and Elizabeth's small voice called out, full of the innocent trust that her parents could fix anything in the world. Ben looked out at the valley, his heart a cold, hard knot in his chest. Love and determination had gotten them this far, but he knew, with a terrible certainty, that it wouldn't be enough to win the fight that was coming. If you believe that the family we choose can be stronger than the one we're born into, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss how this story ends.